Hi guys and welcome to my latest review. Now what I have here is something that you've been asking for last couple of weeks. It's topping E30. And some of you maybe know I was a big fan of its predecessor D30. Few years ago when it came out it was a great DAC and it was basically my first Chinese brand that I ever bought. Before that I just used some HRT, Dragonflies and DACs that I thought to be cheap at that time. But D30 sounded better and was cheaper and I was blown away, and that's how I basically started this whole HiFi DACs adventure that I'm currently on, and I really like doing this. So back to E30 here. Now let's start with the basics. And that would be build quality first. We have aluminum chassis. It can come in silver and black, but the front panel is always made of this glass and it's glossy black. That doesn't change depending on the color of the chassis. Now on the back we have usual inputs that would be USB, optical and coaxial, all three of them, which I really like. We have RCA outputs, and these can be configured in two ways. First one is you use this as a pure DAC with fixed line output of 2 volts. The second way is you use variable outputs, which means you can basically use it as a preamp. And the last thing we see here is a power jack. The DAC is powered by 5 volts, but you cannot power it with the same USB that is used for signal. So you have to use this separate cable, and in the package they provided this cable. So you can see it's a standard USB connector on the other side, so you can connect it to your PC, like separate port, or any 5 volts wall wart, for example, smartphone charger, or if you have something like linear power supply or low noise power supply, even better. Now that I quickly connected everything, I can show you the front panel. We have one touch sensitive button here, and when the device is turned on, it doubles as input selector if you press it shortly, or power off-on switch if you keep it for a few seconds. And the next new feature I want to talk about is actually a remote control. Now we didn't have it with D30, even with D50, only D50S revision brought in remote, but now it's bundled with E32, and I really love it. Besides the usual things, like you can switch it off and on, choose inputs, control volume, and what else? You can also choose the 3 different levels of OLED brightness. Okay, I think that covers everything about build and remote so far. As you can see, OLED is dominated by big orange digits and really small blue indicators for input selection. Now, in the heart of E30, there is a really fresh AK4493 DAC chip, and that basically doesn't mean much, but paired with XMOS USB receiver, it means that E30 supports basically anything you can throw at it, including really high PCM bit rates and all of the possible DSD formats. And that leads me to one quirk that I found out. Basically, when I tried to play DSD64, which is also DSD format used on Super Audio CDs, it would get choppy and error message would show on display from time to time, and the sound is choppy and not stable, like connection is not stable enough. Oddly enough, when I switched to higher DSD rates, 128 to 156 and so on, everything works perfectly, but DSD64 for some reason is glitchy and choppy. And I suppose this might be a driver issue or a firmware issue, and Topping will resolve that down the line. But I just wanted to mention what happened to me. Now let's move to the most important thing, sound quality. Okay, I can be really short and to the point here and say it sounds absolutely great. If you don't like long reviews, it sounds astonishing, especially when you consider its price. But for those of you who'd like to know more, let's start with typical frequency response. Now, there is no character that I can detect. It's not bright, it's not dark, it doesn't emphasize any frequency region. We have deep, punchy bass line, which is also really well controlled. It's not bloated, it's not warmish, but it's not thin. It's just really great. And the same story continues when we go up to the mid-range. It's really clear, it's really crisp. There is no overlap between mid-bass and mid-range. So when I listen to some vocals, for example, they're perfectly clear, crisp and well textured, and I cannot detect in those vocals any emphasis on bass to give like fake bigger body to the vocal, or any emphasis on higher mid-range that would give too much sharpness or coarseness to vocals. It's just really nice and naturally balanced. Same goes, of course, for guitars or any other instruments. They're present, clear, and really nice sounding. And the same story continues when we move up to the highest frequency range. Again, a lot of clarity, a lot of extension, and good thing that it doesn't sound too bright or too harsh or anything. You hear every tiny detail, but they never melt to a white noise, to something that sounds like paper or like aluminum foil that some lesser DACs suffer from. It's just everything is well separated and resolved in a great manner. So when I first got it, I hooked it up to a few headphone amps, to this Fiio K5 Pro here and Schiit Magni 3, and I immediately realized how resolving, how detailed and also lively it sounds. And I quickly compared it, for example, with Fiio K5 Pro integrated DAC section here, which is funny enough, exactly same DAC chip, AK4493. But this is great example that DAC chip isn't everything when it comes to sound quality. And what I found out is that E30 definitely sounds better than integrated DAC inside of K5 Pro here. So if I connect this and use just K5 Pro as an amp, this combo sounds better than this one alone. But what I really wanted is to test it in a more demanding and even more resolving environment. So I basically put it in my main room setup, and I'll put that setup on the screen here so you can see it. It's really resolving, and I guess some of you might say that this system is above D30's pay grade, and judging by the price only, I agree, but I was really eager to find out the maximum limits of this DAC, and let me tell you, it did not embarrass itself at all. I was actually, from the first moment I put it in there, surprised, because I expected to hear some deficiencies, at least some, and the sound I was hearing from it was really great. First of all, the things that I noticed with headphone amps, it is a really detailed sound. It has a really lively character, a dynamic character. And I like that. Everything sounds very present, quite upfront, I might say, but not two-dimensional, not compressed in any way, quite the opposite. It can throw a really nice scale, soundstage of a really nice scale, like the width is quite great. In some recordings, it can go even outside of the speaker's borders. For example, Roger Waters' Amused to Death album, you have some background voices that are clearly recorded to make the impression that they are coming out from the extreme left, outside of your left speaker, and this DAC manages to convey that, and it's great. And all instruments and vocals are really nicely separated, each of them having firm place in the picture and a lot of space to breathe. Nothing feels cramped or compressed. As I mentioned, this is one of the biggest scale of sound that I've heard anywhere near this price point. And as you can see, I was very impressed. So the next thing I actually did is to compare it with Burson Playmate's DAC section. This is a more expensive device, but it is a DAC/amp combo, and I've been using it for quite some time now, and I really like this device. It has great DAC section, and no DAC that I tested so far on this channel managed to surpass that DAC section. Well, until today, because when I compare them, they're quite similar, but just by a little bit, I prefer E30. It offers even better high frequency extension. I can clearly hear cymbals and all kind of whistles or just atmosphere from the music from the recording studio better through this one. Also, it has a little bit more presence, a little bit more punch and bite to the sound, while this one is a little bit warmer and just a little bit more laid back sounding. As I said, quite comparable, but I prefer the E30 actually. Now the price is not comparable. This one is more expensive, but it is DAC plus A-class headphone amp of great power. But if you just need DAC or just preamp without headphone amp, I currently cannot think of anything better near this price that I would rather recommend to anybody. Okay, so here I am giving all these praises, but are there any drawbacks here? Well, aside the DSD64 playback problem that I mentioned before, in terms of sonic quality, basically none. I saw some people mentioned that it sounds a little bit dry, but personally I haven't experienced that. In my system that I mentioned before, with all of these amps, it just sounds really neutral, really transparent. It doesn't lie, it doesn't warm things up, it doesn't soften things. So I guess that might be a reason that if you connect it to a noisy USB ports, if you're using it in a brightish or thin sounding system, it will not help things, because as I said, it's neutral, it's transparent, it doesn't color the sound, and I really like that quality in a DAC. I really do. I like it to be that way, and my other components will bring everything that I need, like good punch, body, and juice to the sound. And to conclude this video review, I really like E30. It brought us few new features. We can use it as preamp, there is a remote control, I really love that. You can choose between several different filters. The sound is even better than I expected. It's really good. And just to save you the time of asking questions like can you compare it to this or that DAC, I find E30 sounds better than basically anything I reviewed on this channel so far. And yeah, I'm going to keep it for some time in my own system. I paired it with a decent linear power supply. It helps elevate sound a little bit more. And it simply sounds much better than the price would suggest. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm not ashamed to have a cheap, affordable DAC in my system just because it's cheap. I find it sounds great, and I'm going to keep it and use it. What else can I say? This is probably one of the easiest recommendations that I ever made. If you're in a need of a great DAC at a reasonable price, this is it. And that would be all for today, guys. If you haven't done that already, please click like and subscribe. And also visit my website, eevreviews.com, for even more comprehensive reviews with scores. Thank you for watching and see you next time.